Often as not, terrestrial flies are as important as aquatic flies, and particularly beetles. I mean, there's thousands of different species of beetles that get blown onto the water systems, and trout eat those. There's also aquatic beetles as well. But this particular fly pattern I'm going to tie here is called, it's a Welsh fly actually, by the name of Coch-Y-Bonddu, which means red and black in Welsh, which is interesting also because fly ties recognize the nature of the hackle, which is red and black, insofar as the relationship of this particular fly, and to my knowledge, is the only fly that has the name of a hackle related to the name of the fly and the species that it imitates. If somebody knows otherwise, let me know about that. Okay, typically when you use black thread or red, it doesn't really make a great deal of difference. Start your thread as normal and run that down about midway the shank of the hook. And we're going to do two things here. First of all, we're going to tie in a medium of gold wire rib, and we just catch that in there with one turn. And then we're going to catch in a small section of flat gold tinsel, and the reason we're doing that is because we're going to tie a small gold tag on the back of the fly, and that's also something you may find with other wet fly patterns that in future you want to tie. They have small butt sections to them, and that's no big deal. Essentially what you do is you tie that in before you get to the tail end, so when you come forward you've got everything there done. Okay, so we've got those two components tied in. Now what we're first going to do is to tie the tag, and we can leave the ribbon medium till last for the reason that it will give us some security to the peacock core body. So just very gently just come back over your black thread, come forward, make that little tag. Just watch you don't catch the point of that hook. That's always a danger point when you're working at the tail end of a fly. You just take your time with that. There's no big rush. One, two, a couple of turns there and we've got that secured. Okay, now back to the peacock hole. If you remember when we discussed tying in techniques of peacock hole, one of the, shall we say, options is this, that if you're going to use 4 for the body, tie in 5 or 6, because if you bust one, you've got a margin of error to work with because you've still got one there in hand. And typically I'm going to use approximately about 4 for this size of hook. I'm going to cut those off square. Now, what we're going to do is this: when we tie it in, we're going to make sure that when we make our first wrap of thread, that we don't have to worry about cutting off excess. In other words, as I move the thread forward, see, I trap down all those ends, which do two things. First of all, it adds security, but secondly, it's clean, a nice neat body, or underbody. I don't have to worry about cutting excess material off. Okay, remember what we did when we tied in the peacock coal. We stroked it out real gentle, and we're just going to wind that in nice, close, direct, right angle turns. So we get that nice buzz of peacock coal fiber sticking up away from the shank of the hook, and not a jumbled mess that we would get if we'd have twisted that. That's fine. We've achieved the body. Come back underneath with the thread, to the thread I should say, make that secure, hold the peacock coil up, twist, and cut it, and you get really, really neat. Now it's really up to you which way you choose to wind this ribbon medium. If you feel a little bit more confident in as far as security to the body in this direction, that's fine. If not, it doesn't really matter. So you're going to come here and you're going to come back over the top. 1, 2, 3, 4. I always try to work with about 5 wraps of thread. The last turn, or the 5th, comes directly below the shank of the hook, then in front of the thread, back behind, and then of course you lock it by doing that process, and then make your final security turns and finish. Okay. Now you can use actually a rooster hackle or a hen hackle on this fly. I did explain earlier on when we started into the program that not all soft hackle flies it doesn't necessitate using soft hackles. Far from it. But what you're not doing is tying a fly that's supporting itself on the surface as a dry fly, because it'll sink anyway. So we'll select one of these hackles out, and by definition we define this as red. It's a really dark red brown. It's not a dyed red in that sense of the word, and it's got a black center to it, and typically it's got some little black outer edges. Furnace is very similar, although that's a little more ginger. Okay, in the case of this, we're going to strip these fibers back, and we're going to trim that back like that, which is going to give us just enough there to catch it in, and when we bring the thread forward, add those security turns to lock it in place. Okay, now if you can do it with your fingers, fine. If not, hackle pliers. Just wind this hackle around in front of the peacock hoe body. What this is actually representing is legs. Years ago, the terminology for a hackle was legs, which is essentially what it's doing. Bring that around, bring the hackle tip up, bring the thread up, bring the hackle tip down, maintain tension, lock it in position. Once you make that one turn around, it's not going to move. And we're going to just cut off the excess like that. Just stroke that gently back so we can build up a nice neat head in front. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then varnish the thread. And we do our whip finish. There's a lot of variations too that you can make with beetle patterns. You know, ostrich hoe works pretty good too, so you can use black ostrich hoe to make a black beetle pattern. And another feather that I really favor to use actually for the hackle on beetle patterns is the feathers from the neck of a ringneck pheasant. They got that very iridescent kind of sheen to them, which is very typical of what you see on the wing cases of beetles. So remember that too. You know, if you can't get this particular shade of hackle, which is not always easy to find, rooster pheasant neck hackle is as good. So remember that, you know, beetles are an important food source for trout in the systems, regardless of whether they're aquatic or terrestrial. And that is one of the best flies of all time to imitate beetles.